My name is Michael Bergeron. I'm a product manager here at Panasonic, and I wanted to talk about the 8K ROI system. And I don't want to. I think a lot of people get intimidated when they see 8K because they're thinking, "Oh, I got to get into this whole 8K world," and maybe that's not practical. But what we're doing with 8K is really for real broadcasting, and it's about utilizing the 8K image to get some more HD to get more HD content. So the camera itself is a camera system. It's a box style camera with an 8K imager in it. Takes EF mount camera, EF mount lenses, and you could use still lenses, and you'll understand why as I go on. And then a base station, very much like a base station for a system studio camera. And from that base station, I get all the imagery. There's also control software, which I'll get into later, but that's also part of the system because you do need to control the camera. The camera works in two different ways. One is as a real 8K camera, and as an 8K camera, it sends the raw image, basically the imager output down the fiber to the CCU and converts that to an 8K output. Now that 8K output is going to be coming out of four 12 gig outputs, so it's basically four 4K outputs, and those are either going to be pixel interleaved or 2SI, or they're going to be quadrants where each is a 4K quadrant of a larger 8K image. Now you can output that and go to another downstream system. There aren't that many of them out there yet, but we expect there will be eventually. But the real bulk of the applications where we see for this are the second mode, and that is where instead of putting out an 8K picture, it's putting out up to 5 HD pictures, all derived from that 8K image. So in the 8K output mode, we actually used this at the Super Bowl, and in that case, we took the full 8K image and we fed that into an Evert stream catcher. And the idea was that we were framed on the end zone and the first 20 yards, basically the red zone, on the Patriots side and on the Rams side. And if there was any replay calls or really interesting stuff that they didn't have coverage of, we could zoom in on the replay, position the camera anywhere from the 20-yard line to the back of the end zone. If you happen to see the Super Bowl, you will understand why we didn't make air, because the way that game worked, almost nothing ever went past the 20-yard line except for one touchdown. And then when people would get pushed back into it, it was the wrong game. And CBS liked the look of the pictures anyway, and they were excited about it. But the Rams and the Patriots had other plans. We also did some tests with the NHL, actually right across town over at T-Mobile. But the ROI, the region of interest, not return on investment, although we hope it is where you take the 8K picture, and because it's 8K, I can do a full pan, tilt, and zoom of a cutout area anywhere in this image. We'd use a wide angle lens, of course. And I can pull a good HD image out of that. Even if I zoom in quite a bit, it doesn't break up. You've seen this happen with 4K imagers where they've done that, but when you zoom in an HD picture out of a 4K imager, it breaks up pretty quickly. You don't get to zoom very much. With 8K, you really get a full amount of zoom. We were doing 400% was looking great. 600% zoom was okay to take to air. I'm not sure if it was really full 1080p, but we found that worked pretty well. And by doing that, the CCU can output 4 of those, as well as the full wide image down converted to HD. So another thing we can do with this is we can link several cameras together to get not just 4 images, but in this case up to 12 images from 3 cameras. And when we're doing that, we can control those all with one operator. We did several tests with some basketball and ice hockey games where we would set up one camera in the center position, one camera left slash and one camera right slash, and then set up a zoom shot and a wide shot, and use the framing software, which I mentioned before, so that if I drive one of these cameras, then we would put in algorithms where that one camera's movement would drive all the other views to follow it. So, and basically to follow a game. So say in basketball, I could follow the ball, and the other cameras would basically be wider shots and shots from other angles that would make the game look right. I'm sorry? I don't. I do, but I don't have it queued up. Still, actually, back up here. So the setup software is you're basically putting in the logic for where you would have the where if this camera goes beyond this line, moving in this direction, then this camera should move this way. This camera should move this way. So you'll do a wide shot, and all it's really doing is panning up and down the court, and it's going by a ratio of where the center camera is, and when it gets to a certain point by the basket, it stops and doesn't move anymore until you come back out of that area. So it's very easy to drive the game cam from a zoom cam. As soon as you get in close, it comes in, parks itself there where it's getting the wide shot, and the same is true for the left and right slash cam. Oh, there we go. So the software, in addition to having one manually driven camera drive the other cameras, we're also developing a lot of other drive systems for software and other ways to move these images around. It works a lot like a PTZ camera, only we don't have the limitations of the PTZs, of the servos. When you do a PTZ camera, there's a limit to how accurately you can stop the pan and the zoom or the tilt. There's a limit to how fast you can move that. When we're just moving around a large canvas, there's really no limit to how quickly we can move that around. We can move from position A to position B instantaneously or anything in between. So it really gives us a more reliable thing. And in terms of any of the drive systems, like auto tracking, facial recognition, a lot of these projects that are not necessarily part of this camera, but other technologies we're working on, those will all feed how we're driving these views. In fact, in the demo over there, we've got one of these cameras set up, and we're driving two of the cutout views, and the other two are following the tracker beacon systems from Black Tracks. And afterwards, you can take a look at those, and that is another system that's used quite frequently. And here's what we're showing over there is, so we've got the 4 views. 2 of them are getting moved by Black Tracks automatically, following the sensor that the people are wearing, and then the other 2 are just using a controller. So in terms of the picture quality, of course, it's a brand new imager, so it's the latest generation imager, and we're supporting hybrid log gamma for HDR support. Just because, I mean, for anything doing 8K, they're probably thinking about these other technologies. We're also doing a distortion correction on the output pictures in a very wide shot. I mean, we're for this to work, it's got to be a very wide shot. But of course, when you're using a very wide lens, you're going to tend to have distortion around the edges. There are algorithms in here that are correcting the distortion as the images move towards the extreme edges of the overall frame. And again, we're using an EF mount lens, and because the lens itself this camera is set up as a lock-off. I'm not zooming that lens. I'm not focusing that lens. It's all done in setup. All the zooming, panning, and tilting is done virtually. So that lens is static. So I don't really need a good PL lens that has no focus breathing or a good zoom, a good solid holding focus during zoom. I can just use a still lens. As long as it's a good picture, I'm good to go. Another neat thing about that is if you've ever come across where you have an LED board in the background or an LED video wall, and when you zoom through with an optical zoom, you will get to some point where you're starting to see a crawl or more artifacting on the back of that screen. Because the zoom is always optical, you won't experience that with this system. So this is just a note of like what I mentioned before. If I do in the full 8K mode, the 4 outputs of the camera are going to be 4K outputs, which will stitch together to form 8K. But when I'm in the region of interest, the cropping mode, then it's going to be 4 HD outputs that are either going to be 1080p, 1080i, 720p, depending on whatever you require. And just in terms of the camera, it works like a regular system camera, and because it's connected with fiber, we've got some of the other features in there like an intercom, and there's a return video. One nice thing about the return video, when you're setting this camera up, it doesn't have a viewfinder because all of the video is being processed in the control unit. So you would feed that processed video back to the camera to use as a viewfinder in the return video. So I mean, so the overall thing is it's a different kind of shooting system, and it's really designed to in a live environment or in a concert or anything like that to eliminate seat kills. You know, every time I set up a full man camera, that's maybe 2 to 4 seats that I lose in that arena. Whereas this, I can get 4 camera views out of it, and I can tie it in under the rafters because it doesn't need to move, and it doesn't need to have an operator. Also easy to use remotely because I have that wide shot, so the guy who's driving it, if you are doing it manually, they can see where they're going, as opposed to a pan-tilt zoom camera where I can move it around just as well, of course, but I don't see what's out of frame. So in this case, I do see what's out of frame, and it just makes the operation easy. So either by having one person driving many cameras or combining this with an auto tracking system, I can get many more camera views without having to increase the amount of staff that I have on site. And of course, if you're trying to deploy something like a Remy van, then this is a good way to get a 3 camera system to cover a full event. There's a lot of requests for things like that because of a lot of the lower tier support, where you're not going to send a full 12 camera outside broadcast truck, but you still want to do a live broadcast because it's available to me because of web streaming or whatever, or if I'm just going to record it. And so that's the idea. It's 8K to solve a production problem and get you more camera angles rather than to just try to get you a higher spec for your production. All right, then, thank you very much. If anybody has any questions, also, we have it set up over there if you want to check it out. But if anybody here has any questions, I'll be happy to take them at this point.